A first-year employee just submitted a strategy brief that reads like it came from someone with 15 years of experience, with clean structure, sharp language, and polished recommendations throughout. The kind of work that used to take a senior person a full day to produce. The manager read it, nodded, and forwarded it to the client. Nobody asked how it was made, and nobody checked the reasoning behind the recommendations. The polish did what polish has always done. It signaled competence, it triggered trust, and the work moved forward. Except this time, the competence was simulated. The thinking behind it was shallow, and nobody in the chain could tell the difference. This is happening right now in offices, firms, and organizations everywhere. And it's changing the rules of professional value in ways most people haven't caught up to yet. Let's unpack why. For decades, producing polished professional work required real skill and real time. The formatting, the structure, the language, the logical flow, those things were expensive to produce. You couldn't fake them without the underlying knowledge. A well-written legal memo meant someone understood the law. A clean financial model meant someone understood the numbers. A sharp strategy brief meant someone had actually thought through the problem. So we built an entire system around that assumption. We used the quality of someone's output as a shortcut for the quality of their thinking. Hiring decisions, promotions, performance reviews, client trust, all of it ran on this shortcut. If the work looked senior, the person behind it probably was. That shortcut just broke. The tools we have now collapse the cost of producing senior-looking output to nearly zero. A person with minimal experience and a well-crafted prompt can generate work that is visually and structurally indistinguishable from what a 10-year veteran would produce, with the same formatting, the same professional tone, and the same confident recommendations. But the thinking behind it didn't come with the tool. The contextual judgment, the awareness of edge cases, the understanding of what could go wrong, the ability to know which recommendation is dangerous in this specific situation, none of that transferred. What transferred was the surface. The gap between how the work looks and how deeply it was thought through just became invisible. And that invisible gap is where the real damage happens. Think about what this means for the junior person. In the short term, it looks like a massive advantage because they're producing work that used to be above their level. They're impressing managers, and they're moving faster than anyone expected. But here's the trap. If the tool is doing the hard part, they're not building the skills underneath. They're skipping the struggle that builds real judgment. The reps, the mistakes, the feedback loops, the slow accumulation of knowing what works and what doesn't in messy, real-world situations. They're getting credit for output that isn't teaching them anything. 5 years from now, they might have the title of a senior person without the instincts of one. Now think about the senior person. Their years of hard-earned experience just became harder to distinguish from a tool-assisted shortcut. The visible markers of their expertise, the things that used to set them apart in a meeting or on a deliverable, got commoditized overnight. Their value is still real, and their judgment is still rare, but it's now invisible to anyone who only evaluates the finished product. And the most uncomfortable position might be the managers. They're making decisions based on work they assume went through a real thinking process. They're forwarding deliverables to clients, to leadership, to regulators, trusting that the polish reflects depth. When it doesn't, the error doesn't show up as a bad document. It shows up months later as a bad decision, a strategy that missed a critical risk, a recommendation that ignored context, or a plan that looked airtight but was built on assumptions nobody pressure tested, and nobody traces it back to that one polished brief that everyone trusted because it looked right. This scales in a way that's hard to see from the inside. When one person skips the thinking, the impact is limited. When an entire organization starts trusting machine polished output across dozens of workflows, the errors compound invisibly. Everything looks fine on the surface because the documents are clean, the reports are on time, and the presentations are sharp. But underneath, the verification layer is thinning out, and nobody notices until something breaks. So, where does the real value land in this new landscape? Not with the person who produces the fastest output, because the tools already won that race. The value lands with the person who can look at polished work and tell you whether the thinking behind it is actually sound. The person who asked the uncomfortable question about a report everyone already accepted. The person who knows which assumption in a financial model could blow up under different conditions. The person who can spot what's missing, not just what's there. That's verification, that's judgment, and that's the ability to evaluate something that already looks finished and determine whether it's actually ready. The old career path was simple: produce good work and get promoted. The new career path is different: verify, contextualize, and exercise judgment on work that machines can now produce, because that's what makes someone indispensable. Here's one thing you can do this week. The next time a polished deliverable crosses your desk, pause before you evaluate how it looks, and instead evaluate how it thinks. Ask what assumptions it's built on, ask what it doesn't address, and ask whether the person who produced it can walk you through the reasoning without the document in front of them. That one habit, evaluating thinking instead of evaluating polish, might be the single most valuable professional skill in this transition. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the most polished thing you've seen recently that turned out to be wrong?